Yeah, also, okay. Firstly, thank you for coming and attending this PDL meet. We did say last time we met we would try and make this a half termly kind of get together, which we're gonna do. So this is this half term's get together. Normally, as you know, PDL meets are about you bringing kind of your successes and sharing it with everyone, and so others can take that away. This one's a bit more structured because there is some information we want to ensure come your way and make sure that everyone's on the same hymn sheet going forward. Okay, so there is a chance, and I'll go through the agenda in a minute, but there is a chance to ask lots of questions. So if you've got questions, great. At the relevant time, you can ask. Can make sure everyone's mics are off because we've got a bit of feedback. Lovely, thank you. Okay, so yeah, we've got myself in the room, we've got Diane, what's in the room, we've got Pauline also in the virtual room as well. And at the appropriate times, those two individuals will also speak, if and when necessary. Just so you know, if you didn't already know, Diane is leaving STEM Learning soon, and therefore Pauline is taking up the majority of this kind of just looking after the computing clusters from a high level. Okay, so just so you know that. Right, okay, so but you're still going to have me as the lead. You're still going to have me as the lead kind of supporting the PDLs around this. So the agenda is Diane's got some administrative points to go through just to make sure that everyone's doing the right things from that front. I'm going to delve into some of the misconceptions that we're hearing just to give clarity on some of the parts of the cluster, just so everyone's on the same hymn sheet. There was a video that was shared in the community. Hopefully you've all had a chance to view that around what kind of an action plan should be looking to achieve, what it should look like, and the exemplar is also there, so you've got that to kind of use. We're going to have a chance to look at that a little bit more detail, ask questions at that point around action planning, then a chance for you to kind of speak up and share both your successes and your challenges that are going on within cohort 1 of the clusters, and we're very much listening so that we can adapt going forward. There's a little bit around the connection to I Belong. So Diane's going to talk about that briefing note, and then it's open floor to ask any questions that haven't been asked through the rest of the time. Okay, so Diane, over to you for the admin side. I'll stop sharing and then I'll share again when I need to.
Everybody. First of all, an update on cohort 2 clusters. I know quite a lot of you have put in nominations, expressions of interest for those. We are still looking at those. We may be in touch with some of you about extra schools. So do bear with us. We will be letting you know very shortly about the way forward for those. Just a few reminders with regards to admin things. If you can please promptly tell us of any changes to schools within your clusters. That's whether any of them have dropped off or any new ones are being added. We are very happy for additional schools to be added to your cohort 1 clusters, by the way. At the moment, up to a maximum of 6, but if you've got more, let us know, because we might have to amend the reporting tool, but we're happy for more schools to be added, particularly if in your cohort 1 clusters you've only got 3 schools. So do let us know of any changes. We'd really like you to chase up any letters of intent that haven't come through yet. And I think the first question there is going to be, how will I know whether the letters of intent have come in? So in the OneDrive folder, you should all have access to a folder called May 23 Initial Cohort. What do is I'm going to pop a link to that in the chat, and then if you haven't got access, do let me know. Anything is of SharePoint. And in there is a list of all of the computing cluster schools and whether or not and when their letter of intent was returned. So if you can chase any of those up, that would be marvellous. And also, if any of you have yet to return your statements of work or master agreements for cohort 1, please do let us know. I know that there's various reasons why that might be delayed, but it's a little worrying that we haven't seen that back at our own. The question then is, well, is this cohort actually, this cluster actually active? So if you can do that as soon as you can. Likewise, when you get your cohort 2 ones through. Finally, on the admin side, it's just a plea, really. Can you please, when you contact us, we love to hear from you. It is real people answering the generic email address, and it generally does get to myself or Helen, perhaps Pauline directly anyway. But if you can always use the computing clusters at stem.org.uk email address, I'm bobbing that in the chat as well. And please don't CC other people in, because otherwise I end up getting three of the same email sometimes, and it's not clear who should be answering it or who has answered it, and it just wastes everyone's time. So if you can just send it into there, and just be rest assured they are triaged, and someone will get back to you as soon as possible. So the other thing, sorry, is there a question there? No? Okay. The other thing was I'd like to share with you a briefing document for the I Belong programme. I'm going to put it in that folder that I've just given you the link to, so that you have reference to it. I don't think, Paul, we can share it from where it is at the moment. I think we'll have to turn that into a PDF, won't we, at some point. But it's basically some guidance on how you can involve your cluster schools in the I Belong programme, particularly, in fact, very importantly, if their eligibility criteria for getting a place in a cohort 1 cluster was that they were going to enrol on what we then knew as the Gender Insights programme. Okay, well, I'm going to bob that into that group now, and then I will post a link in the chat a bit later on. And then we push for time, so I'm going to hand back over to Pauline.
Thanks, Diane. Is there any questions around any of that before I move on? No, lovely. Okay, quickly share my screen again just for the next section. Right, okay, so yeah, just wanted to clarify some of the things that have been coming through to us from various different places, or perhaps some misconceptions that are out there. And we just want to make sure that everyone is singing from the same hymn sheet. So we'll go through these one by one. If you do have any questions about any of them, feel free to put your hand up and we could discuss them a little bit more. Okay. The first one is around the relationships with the computing cluster with hub leads and computing hubs. Okay. And now if you watch the video, you would have kind of been reminded that at the top, there is a space in which you should be action planning the things that those individuals within those schools can be doing aside from the computing cluster to support their school moving through all 7 of those dimensions, particularly the 2 that they're working on. Now that is the CPD element that sits outside of your cluster. Okay, so it's not within the cluster, but because you're working with those individuals, you can point them off to the CPD. So your relationship with the hub lead should be such that you've identified CPD that would suit those schools, those individuals within the schools. You've identified the certificates that has the CPD in, and you're working with the computing hub leads to ensure that they have the CPD in place in the time frame that you're thinking, so that you've got somewhere for them to point to. Okay, that's the relationship. It should be an ongoing relationship, an ongoing communication with your hub leads. Okay. And the emphasis is on you to do that in the first instances, but be open to hub leads coming to you as well, saying, you know, how's your cluster getting on? Is there anything I can support with? So that's the first thing around relationships. Any questions on that? Nope, lovely. Okay. So the second one is, and this is because I think the statistic is that only 91% of the cohort 1 schools have completed the CQF. And I think that was a statistic I got given this morning. I don't know if that's totally correct, but just to make it absolutely clear, the CQF should be the first thing that the schools, I can see a hand, I'll come to it in a second, that the schools within the cluster should have done before anything else has occurred. Because without that, you cannot identify the support they need. Okay, so if any of your schools within the cluster hasn't self-assessed yet, they must do it. They must do it as soon as you can. Okay, I'm just going to see who the hand is. Melanie.
Hi, I'm sorry, I'm not sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So just to clarify the CPD, so in the document called Computing Cluster Funding Model, CPD is mentioned in terms of the bespoke interventions. So is that considered to be outside of the cluster then?
So I am going to get onto that point, but just to touch on it now.
Yes.
If you ever see CPD within any document, it's a legacy issue. Okay, the training was very clear that there should be no CPD within a cluster. So the advisor training that you all attended, no CPD goes on within a cluster. It has to go outside of a cluster. The DFE were very, very clear on that when they agreed this model. Okay, so previously we did suggest that that's what we wanted to do, and we worked with the DFE on a model that we were both happy with. That's where we're at now. So no CPD can occur within any element of a cluster. And I'll come back to that a little bit more. I suppose that's what I'm on to now. So we've kind of heard in different ways and different versions that could be occurring, where things like you've pulled PD or slides from different PDEs and put it together and start delivering it as part of the bespoke intervention or as part of the work groups. That can't happen. That needs to stop if it is happening. Okay. I'll come to what bespoke interventions look and feel like at the end, but it's just to be as clear as I can, you cannot deliver traditional CPD through the cluster. Okay, so there should be no delivery of PDs, PowerPoints, etc., etc. All right. So the next one, go on, Sarah.
Right, just really quickly there. What if the CPD isn't available? I think I'm asked it in the thing nearby, because we have got this. Hubs can only put on certain CPD. At primary, we need a leading one, a face-to-face, really, and an implement and teach computing curriculum. We can't do that strand of the CQF if we haven't got an implement and teach computing curriculum. So can we have a look at that and see what to do? Because otherwise, we're going to have to get people travelling quite far.
Right. Okay. So where it's a face-to-face, it needs to be face-to-face course, and the three computing hubs that are in your area can't provide that. For whatever reasons, we need to think about how we ensure that they can provide that and do provide that. Is that? Yeah. Okay.
And don't have to drive for miles. Yeah.
Yeah. No. That will obviously we be working with the local computing hub to make sure that they do have the facility to do that. Okay. That's what we need to do. Brilliant. Carmine?
Just following up from what Sarah just said now, but am I correct? Obviously, that remote CPD is one thing, and not all the hubs are given whatever they're given centrally, or they got to ask centrally, and that's got to be discussed. But face to face, I think every hub can put everything on. At least that's how we're working within my hub. If it is something face to face that you've got a demand in your area, the hub can actually put it on, so long as they've got someone who can deliver it. In which case, then you just need to find someone to travel your way, or obviously Sarah can deliver that anyway with their eyes shut. But that's my understanding. Am I understanding it wrong?
In terms of the type of course they can put on, they do have that autonomy. Yes, I think Sarah's talking about the amount of courses. Is that what you're saying, Sarah? The amount of courses that they're able to put on, and therefore it hasn't fit within the amount. Yes. So what we're saying is, if they've already kind of maxed out the amount they can put on, can we put an extra one on?
Sorry, understood. Thank you.
But
sorry, Sarah.
Yeah. Melanie?
Yeah, thank you. I just put my question in the chat. So to solve that problem, would the hub be able to run this CPD as an invite-only remote? Because I'm thinking, it may be then more easily budgeted because you don't need a venue, etc. I'm just thinking, would that be a possibility to solve that problem?
So in general terms, and we can obviously we'll take this back to me and Pauline and talk about things, but in general terms, a face-to-face course can't just automatically be turned into a remote course because it is delivered in a much different way with different notes.
Yeah.
So we can't kind of just say, let's put on remote, but we'll take that back as a possibility of what we can do in that situation.
Yeah,
okay?
That'd be super, super useful for, yeah.
Brilliant. Sarah?
Yeah, I'm just kind of adding on to the courses and where it might not be viable. So the face-to-face is one issue. One we've already found in our hub is, so a cluster is wanting a short course, the data loggers, for example, and they're non-priority schools. So as a computing hub, if we put that course on for 2 schools, it's not really useful for a computing hub to put that on. But obviously this cluster wants that support. So I think that's the other issue as well, is if, you know, from the cluster point of view, if you're saying you need to have this CPD, but then maybe the computing hub is saying, well, we've only got so many courses available, that's not necessarily a viable option, depending on KPI targets, etc.
Yeah, okay. I think it's part of the same discussion that we can take back. But if you think of it more like, and it depends how the hub want to deliver it. So I see it more as that's 2 in the bag for a course already, and the course could be delivered to more than the people within the cluster. But it means you've got 2 in the door, and you need a few more. But you've got a good head start if you have that in.
Yeah, that is what we've done this time. But I'm just meaning like next cohort, there's going to be lots of clusters. It's just a consideration if there's a different way that model could work.
Yeah, thanks, Hera. I'm making notes, Pauline. I hope you are as well, just so we're not missing anything. Brilliant. Okay, so the next one is around the 18 hours, kind of, you know, all the elements within the professional learning of a computing cluster. Just to clarify around that a little bit. So the first thing is obviously it's up to 18 hours. So you know that not everyone within the cluster might need the full 5 hours of coaching. We've already come across that, where they don't need the full 5 hours of coaching. But don't think of it as one person going off to do 18 hours of professional learning, and therefore they don't have the time to do any more CPD. Think of it more as the individuals within that school that's involved in the cluster can get up to the 18 hours of CPD, and other individuals within the schools can go up to do other elements of the CPD, you know, non-specialist CPD and things like that. And to add to that, the next one down is, you know, the cluster is focusing on 1 dimension or 2 at the most, which needs the most support. And therefore the professional learning within that cluster is focused on 2 out of 7, of our overall dimensions, right? Which means there are 5 or 6 dimensions in which they need to be moving through that outside of the cluster. And therefore CPD can be pointed to from the advisor towards the leads within the school to say, you know, this person should be doing this person should be doing that, in order to move through the other dimensions. It doesn't have to just be the dimensions that you're working on in the cluster that you point them off to CPD in. In fact, it's probably better the other way. And I'll talk more about that when we talk about action plans. So that's just around the kind of, I suppose, the kind of a bit about, are they available to do CPD if they're doing the clusters themselves in terms of time. So the few things to think about there. Next one is we've had 1 or 2 kind of requests come in this, and it's just to make it clear, the funding is for the PDLs to give the support. There is no funding whatsoever to be spent on resources. Okay, so we can't use any cluster funding to buy anything in. All right, so just to quash that one now. So moving on to kind of this bespoke interventions I touched upon before, if they have seen kind of this bespoke CPD wording anywhere, it is a legacy issue, so apologies for that. But as I said in the training, we were very clear that it can't be CPD. So I'm just going to give a few examples and kind of what it can look like. So we've been through these before, but just to remind you, kind of it could be things around curriculum design. So, you know, being more creative in the curriculum, having a more inclusive curriculum, embedding X, Y, or Z into a curriculum like physical computing or ed tech, that sort of idea, where it's you're looking at their curriculum, you're analysing the curriculum or a collection of curriculums and developing it alongside them. That's bespoke intervention. That's not CPD. Okay, and taking that along further, things like embedding pedagogical principles into curriculums, looking at digital competence, looking at things across curriculum, okay, computing, tech, digital, things like that. It could be things like changing perceptions within a set of people, so change perceptions within with the students, so that you get more people choosing GCSE computer science, as an example, or changing perception of parents, leaders, etc., and all the resources that and support you might need for someone to have that, the materials to do that, and the confidence to do that. So they're the sorts of things you can do. There's obviously a much longer list than that. These are just clear examples. As I said before, it's never about delivering PowerPoints to them, delivering PDs to them, not standing in front of them and telling them what to do. It's about working with them, bespoke intervention. It's not CPD, okay? So it could be, as I said before, working collaboratively on documents, working collaboratively on resources, being part of their kind of observations and feedback, maybe looking at assessing how, planning for assessment, things like that. Designing engagement activities together. So these are the sorts of things that you want to be looking at around bespoke interventions as we speak. Bespoke interventions is definitely one of the things we are reviewing. So any feedback you have on those things, if you've already got people to do that, I think there's not many people who've started that bespoke interventions bit yet, but if you have, then feedback how they're going, that would be fantastic. Okay, we've got a few questions. Catherine, then Carmina.
Just so I'm absolutely clear on this one. So basically, I've got a cluster who are focusing on what makes a good computing lesson and pedagogy, and we're working in a work group around that and putting stuff into place in the schools. But if we want the rest of the staff to start doing this around a bespoke intervention around those pedagogies, standing at the front and just saying these are what the pedagogies are, and as a delivery is not acceptable, but you could say these are some of the pedagogies, and then sit down with them and work and look at what's coming up in their unit next term and do a bit of planning around that would be okay, with a little bit of delivery at the start as to what a pedagogy is.
Obviously, yeah, you're obviously going to have your introductions as to kind of what we're trying to achieve here and that sort of thing, but just
we're
not
doing Parsons
delivering
problems. Let's
slides.
have a look where that's going to fit in this unit that you're doing next term, and we sit down and we do that together.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's exactly that.
Perfect. Right.
Carmina.
Just a quick one. So, obviously we've not got rid, but CP303 kind of being overseeded, or they don't count, or whatever, but they can still be done, right?
Yes.
But they're not a thing at the same time, because that code is kind of almost redundant, at least in the computing hub perspective, as far as I can see. But if something's not provided by a PDE or by a course that already exists, and is what that cluster needs because they're working on the one dimension, so so we can't put anything on a PowerPoint, which is the easiest way of showing them. Because
so
it looks like because CPDs, that can't do CPDs, like saying you can't do computer clusters, isn't it? That is professional development.
Yeah, so the traditional sense of our CPD is that kind of PDE delivery, right? So
I understand. So do not deliver PDEs or elements of PDEs that have been adjusted, and you're calling it bespoke, because that's wrong. I understand that.
Yeah. So the first thing, the C303s are, as they were, kind of engagement activities that the hubs can still run them, but they don't get the KPIs around them, right? So they're for engagement purposes, engage them and then get them into real courses. We can't have the grey areas around CPD being within clusters, because the DFE were very clear they can't be, because it cannibalizes the hub offer, right? What we're not saying is you couldn't have a few slides to introduce what you're trying to achieve and then working with the schools to achieve it. So we're not standing there for 90 minutes delivering traditional professional development, but kind of introducing them and then let's get into it. Let's look at what you've got. Let's see how we fit it in. Very much like Catherine's model. Okay. Sarah and then Melanie.
Hi, just a question on filling the action plan form in for this. So this might sound a silly question. There's 3 slots for the bespoke. Let's say for one of mine, I've got 6 schools, and potentially they're going to have half a day each. So there's going to be 6 sessions that may be different. Am I just adding extra? I just obviously don't want to mess up the spreadsheet. Do I add extra on? Do I write them separately in one? Just that, because it might not be 3 sessions, there may be more.
Yeah, no. So for visual purposes, I'll move on to the action plan. Actually, I don't now, because the other thing is that we're talking about action plans. Once we've been through all of this, then please, by the end of next week, which is 27th of October, get yourself up to date in them action plans, because we are going to start delving deep into them to see what we can pull out of them. Okay, but I'll go into the action plan now and talk a little bit about that. So this bit here, bespoke interventions, is split into 3, because if you remember back to the training, the way in which it was, and again, this is something that feedback is great because we can develop and mold and change going forward. But the way it was set up was that there was 3 sets of 3 days. Okay, so a PDL who was going to deliver the bespoke intervention element would be kind of contracted for 3 days to focus on a particular intervention. Okay, so you would have an intervention that you wanted to work on, like Catherine mentioned, let's say the Parsons problems and building Parsons problems within their curriculum. So that would be one of the 3, and they would be, you could work with as many of the schools within a cluster on that one problem for up to 3 days. Okay, so that's the way if you like, the model was developed, and that's the way we kind of are paying out the PDLs. But that is something potentially we could change cohort 2 with. If you're telling me now already that there's potentially 6 smaller bespoke interventions, and I'm looking at Pauline here to see if we can already change that in cohort 1. If you're telling me there's 6, then the easiest thing to do is just to put them both like 2 on one line. Just put 1 dot something, 2 dot something, and split it out that way. But what that would mean is you're contracting a PDL to do 1.5 days on each. Do you understand? Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah,
Brilliant. Okay.
thank you.
Melanie, question, and then I'll move into the action plan itself.
Right, thank you. So, and I do apologise. I'm confused about a few things, but hopefully it's relevant to a few of us. So, first of all, am I right in saying that as a work group lead, I'm also able to fulfill the role as the person delivering the bespoke intervention? Is that correct?
So there is obviously different elements within the cluster. Advisor, work group lead, bespoke intervention, coach. Okay, and there's then the implementation support, which we do centrally. So there's 4 rules. What we were very clear on is you can't monopolize a cluster, so you couldn't do all of them. It wouldn't make sense. What you're actually trying to achieve is who is the best person to deliver that bespoke intervention in terms of their capability and their skill set, their experience, etc. Okay,
Yeah.
If it makes sense that you are the advisor and you do some bespoke interventions, then yes, we will listen to that. If it makes sense that you are the advisor and the work group lead, that makes sense. If it starts to get to the point where you're the work group lead, the advisor, and the bespoke intervention for everything intervention, that's starting to feel like it's not making sense.
Absolutely, totally understand that. Thank you. So, but moving on from that, I'm so sorry. Is it possible, because I do hope that I don't have to do both. So, is it feasible, for example, that bespoke intervention looks like reviewing of existing assessments, right? So I could imagine that would be 1 day of bespoke intervention, at least of this PDL, reviewing all existing assessments of the cluster schools, giving feedback, and maybe they then need to rewrite it. And then moderating the results. I could once the assessments have taken place, I could easily imagine that that would actually be the 3 days of this one PDL for a cluster, to review the existing assessments, but also be the moderating outside eye for results, to make sure that these teachers know what an aid looks like, etc. So would that be, that's my first question. I would imagine that is suitable intervention, right? Am I correct in that?
It sounds like a suitable intervention if
Yep.
if
Yes.
if the dimension you're working on makes sense.
Teaching learning. Yeah. So, but then could I then, so if I have a work group lead who does that, a PDL who does that bespoke intervention, as part of our 5-day work group lead, could I dedicate 1 day for the schools to work together to respond to the feedback from the PDL who's reviewed their assessments? to essentially to support them in the rewrite of the assessments? Could that go hand in hand in that shape?
So the work group part, and
Yeah.
I'm not saying no, it just needs to make sense. So the work
Yeah.
group part has to have a agreed theme early on within the cluster that they're working on.
Yeah.
Okay, where they essentially do some research about what seems to work or try things about what seems to work, work together on that, come back, share the kind of what's working, what's not, so that at the end you've got this tangible kind of almost like a case study of what it is we tried, what didn't work, what worked. So we've got kind of evidence of, you know, what would work actually day to day within a school system, essentially. So if the work group theme is very closely aligned to that, the theme that you're suggesting there, then that would be feasible, but it must marry up with what you're trying to achieve within the work group. Okay.
I think I've got it. I think maybe not forever, but thank you. Thank you.
Okay, any more questions before we move into the action planning part? Right, okay, so hopefully you have seen the video, so I'm not going to go into every kind of detail like I did just when I went through it for the video, but just to be clear on a few points. The first thing is, as the advisor, you are responsible for the action plan, the evaluation in time, and the progress checklist. Okay, you're also responsible to ensure that the person who's doing the bespoke intervention has given you the detail so that you can fill this bit in. But I didn't go through that in the video. We will do that. I will do another video around this and around the work group, but I didn't want to dilute it yet. I wanted to focus on the advisor stuff. Okay, so we will do another video around work group. We will do another video around bespoke intervention. But as an advisor, those three and this one is your responsibility to make sure it's filled in. Okay. Now, I don't want to go into massive detail, but essentially the schools you have within the cluster need to have self-assessed so that you've got the scores here. From the scores in an ideal world, I know cohort one's slightly different because you kind of brought them in without knowing what the scores were and stuff. But in the ideal world, you've identified that actually teaching and learning assessment in EDI and SEND are the biggest problems within the cluster. And therefore, they're the two that's been chosen. And therefore, the focus of this part and this part is all around that. Okay, so that's your professional learning within the cluster, right? This bit here, for those who used to be SMEs, will be more familiar than this. This is essentially you saying, these are the things that I think you should go and do as a school, as individuals within the school that will support your school moving forward. It will support going through not just the dimensions we're doing now, but also the other dimensions within the framework. Because if you go back to what's the idea of the framework, it's basically saying if you get all elements, all dimensions within the framework at a high level, then you're going to be performing really, really well as a school. Okay, so the way I kind of broke it down, this was okay. So if these are my challenges and there's things they can do outside of the cluster that's going to help those challenges, I'm going to point them in that direction. What I probably wasn't clear enough in the video was actually that does it need to be just around these two? And there's plenty enough room on this kind of overspill area here to also point them in the right direction for other areas. So for instance, Newcastle Comprehensive, which doesn't exist by the way, I just made it up. Newcastle Comprehensive has some issues around impact for outcomes as well as staff development. What support can I give them? Link to the CQF kind of next steps for them outside of the cluster, and just point them in the right direction, the right CPD and the resources that they can do around that as well. Okay, so that sits in this part and it sits in this part. Okay, so that's like an overspill, if you like, if you've not enough room. It's important that we're saying who from which schools are doing what. Okay, at the very least, which schools are involved in these parts. All right, the sorts of dates. It might not all be within the year time frame. There might be some that you need to do kind of after, like the completion of a certificate might not be feasible to complete within a 6-month period, but they should be starting it now and then completing it kind of next year. It means they come back after the cluster, which is obviously really what we want as well. And just to make it very nice and easy for those who you're going to share this with. And again, you can share it in such a way where you just pull that one sheet and give it to each individual school so you can see it. They've got links directly into that where they can book it, essentially, or where they can utilize that resource. So that's the stuff outside. I will pause there because there's a few hands up, and I'll go into the inside. So this is the CPD part which you work with your computing hub lead around, saying this are the things that I have that my schools would benefit from, that they're interested in getting involved with around these dates. Can you put this face to face on, or is there a remote session that you can point me towards, etc., etc., etc. Okay, brilliant. Coming, was that a hand down or you?
Yeah, well, you answered the questions. That's
Yeah.
basically where that's where the CPD goes.
Yes, CPD resources.
Yeah, and I've struggled with the link. Basically, one thing that I personally, and probably because I don't know, maybe my head wasn't as easily with it as it should have. But it basically it's a collaboration between us and whatever computing hub in terms of making smooth the creation of the links and things like that. Is that the role, or is that within the roles of the?
Yeah, it's kind of gone back to kind of school engagement program year one, that part, isn't it? It's like you're working with a school, you know what training they need, and you work with the hub to make sure that's on, rather than you working very closely with the hub like you did in year 2 and 3 and 4, whatever it was. Right, so that's the stuff outside of the cluster. So that would occur even if the cluster didn't exist, right? That's how you used to work as an SME. So within the cluster, as we said, there's different elements. The work group, there's the coaching, there's the bespoke intervention, and there is the implementation sessions. Okay, so the work group session I'm going to come down to because it's this bit, so I'm not going to talk about that now. The coaching challenge, okay, and Sarah, you're right, terrible examples, but it's the idea is where you are, where there is a challenge with an individual within any of the schools that you're in a cluster. This, it doesn't matter what the challenge is, but they've got a bit of a challenge that they could do with either some mentoring or coaching on, where you could give them some of your time or the coach's time, where they can ask questions, where you can either kind of mentor them through the questions, or you can, back it back their way for them to come up with the solutions. You all know how, majority know how to do coaching mentoring. And it's they're getting that kind of individual support on a challenge that they have. Now, the example I've given is that there's two. So the way, just let's go back. So the way we split that was that there's 5 days worth of coaching. So what I basically done was let's split that into 5 different challenges, if you like. So we could split a different coaches up. It might be the same coach, someone who's really good at coaching and knows their stuff in terms of the topics that are coming up, but it might be 2 coaches. We said there could be multiple, but it's the idea that within the schools you've identified like a non-specialist who needs some support, you've identified someone who needs some support around X and someone who needs support about Y. They need more support, they need 2 days worth of support. So I put down physical computing, microbit support, because they just want to ask questions about what's the best, what's not best, what works, what doesn't work, I've had this problem, blah, 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 blah. There's 2 days worth of support for that one individual around that. So that's been put in twice. Okay. There's only 1 day support in this example, made up example, because there's a non-specialist who needs support around the key stage. They're delivering key stage 3 for the first time. So they're going around, they're teaching it, and they just want some time to speak to someone about what went wrong, what didn't go wrong, how could I have done that better, etc., etc., etc. Okay. And lastly, again, there's 2 people that need support around adaptive teaching and support of all learners. So they're both getting a day's worth of coaching each. Okay. Can you notice that you can't really tell from looking at this the difference between these 2? And I don't think it's that important. All we need to know is that there is 5 days worth of coaching going on in those subjects. What you as an advisor need to do is to ensure that the coach is working through that, giving them an hour of their time over X amount of weeks, months in a topic, and you're keeping on top and making sure that's occurring. And that's what you check off in the progress list, which I'll come back to when we get to that bit. But there's a few hands up, and there's some questions that have come in the chat. So I'll go to the chat, hands up. So it's Carmina, then Melanie, and I'll come to the chat.
A really quick one, for coaching, So the model that we discuss and do with the PDLs is obviously more of the coaching, the listening, the boosting, blah blah blah. But quite a lot of ECTs, and there's a big trend at the moment with instructional coaching. Is coaching anything that basically is gonna work and be used really professionally, or the coaching that we're referring to is only the one that we kind of sharing in lead PDL sessions with our colleagues? I know this seems strange, but I've delivered also the MPQs, and one of the MPQs modules is all about instructional coaching, which feels very different, and it is very different than the other model of coaching and so on. And they're obviously both relevant, but is it down to the PDL, and as long as it is effective coaching?
Yeah, so I think firstly, obviously, the PDL who's involved in this, you're going to have different levels of competency around coaching. You are going to have someone who's gone through it in a professional, using an actual professional qualification on coaching, whereas majority perhaps have just done our kind of senior or lead PDL with the coaching kind of specialist module. So that's the first thing. The second thing I would suggest, Carol's typing, so she's going to put me right here. I know she is, but the second thing is think more of it as what does the teacher need? Okay, if it's mentoring, then mentoring through this mode is fine. If it's coaching, using your skill set is fine. So it's not just we call it coaching, but we know that mentoring is also viable at this point. Okay. Yes, so Carol, thanks. So, as an advisor, Carol is choosing the people who she knows is proficient at it. All right. Brilliant. Thank you. Melanie?
Right, so I'm wondering if coaching can be split up, right? Because we've got 5 days, and it seems at this point, it seems a little bit like a first come, first serve on this occasion. So is there a way to stage that possibly? I just feel like, the challenges that teachers meet now will be very different to the challenges they meet in January or, closer to exams. So how can we make it such that, we serve what they need at the time, and so that these 5 sessions, if you like, these 5 challenges that the cluster has available isn't very quickly filled up, and then later on we can't meet the need. I hope I've made myself clear. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think you have. So if you haven't identified kind of 5 days worth of coaching when you've done the first analysis of that school and you've talked to each of the leads, and then you could still kind of later on within the cluster think, right, that person needs some coaching. It's quite clear now, and that, or someone who didn't want coaching before is now open to it. Then you can add that to the actual plan going forward. Okay, so if you're only able to identify 2 types of 2 topics right now and 2 people who need support, that's fine. And then you've got time later on to think that person could do with some coaching, or that person could come forward, and we can add that as we go. Okay. Okay, just want to, Carmine, I don't know if yours is a re-raised hand or not, but I'll come to you in a second. Just on some of the questions that have come in, again, around funding. There is no teacher release money for this, okay? There's an extensive amount of support we're giving schools, and if they've agreed to do the cluster and get this extensive amount of support from experts, then working with them on when they can do that has to occur outside of subsidized subsidies for it. And that's just the way it is. That's what was agreed at the start. Okay. What we've always said was we understand the climate in schools at the minute, and therefore be flexible in terms of when you can give the coaching, be flexible as to when you do the work group sessions, and be flexible as to the kind of the mode. Yes, the ideal is face to face for a couple of hours on the first kind of work group, so that everyone's on the same hymn sheet. That's the ideal, and if we can pull that off, brilliant. but if it needs to be an hour after school on remote because no one else, you can't do it any other way, then we're flexible around that. Okay. I don't know if these are just questions are coming in. No. Right. Okay. So that's the coaching bit. I think I've laboured the bespoke intervention bit a little bit before, but just so we're clear, each one of those is 3 days worth of support and working with someone on an actual, or working with a group of schools or one school in particular on a particular challenge. Okay. And as I said, we're happy if you've got more than, like in Sarah's example, she wanted to do 6 and just put it on this, 2 on 1 line, as long as it adds up to the 9 days, and that's what the school need, which is separate from any of the CPD. That brings us on to the last one, and this is the implementation part. This is the one that's changed the most from when we kind of put it in as the idea. It is now central. To give you an idea of what is available, then please use this implementation schedule. But the only difference is it's going to start. So this is going to move along. So where it says secondary computing, this is going to move along to November. The first one is November. We didn't do any of these for various reasons, but we will be starting in November with secondary computing systems and data and information. What we're going to do is produce the long list of the sessions and the dates they're on, and link it into these tools so that it's there. But that's just to give you an idea. Now, what they are, okay, is where you've sent them off to do specific courses, okay, behavior for learning courses, inclusive classroom, teaching computer science, inclusive student engagement. Then if they've delivered, or sorry, not delivered it, but if they participated in that course, they may want some support around how do they implement some of the strategies within it. Okay. What these are PDLs who deliver this type of course, will be available as a kind of 90-minute session where they can drop in, ask questions about how would be best. I've been on this course. How is it best to actually implement this within the classroom? Okay, this is based on research about if you actually take the time to plan how you would implement your CPD you go on, it does have more impact. All right. So it's new. It's something new that we're doing. So again, we'll see how it fares, but it's the idea of you're pointing to the 3 that makes sense to your cluster because of the things that you've sent them on to do, linked to the cluster this time. All right. Any questions on that bit? Okay, so lastly is the work group. Now the work group bit here, this is your ownership, and this is you working with the work group lead as an advisor to make sure that you're clear on what they're doing. The ownership of the work group, where it's more detailed, is for the work group lead. So if the work group lead takes full ownership and is writing all the activities down and what the purpose is and who is it for and all of that thing in here, and you just need to transfer it into here, that's fine, kind of working back over a little bit. But it might be just that you're having a conversation with the work group lead. Really, really good practice is for you to be at that first work group lead session as the advisor, so you're fully aware of what's going on, and it's just outlining the kind of the next few months in a work group. How is it gonna look? Okay, so you can see it's a combination of things. There's a face-to-face meeting followed by a task. Then there's a remote meeting followed by a task. Then we're going to evaluate what we've done. Then there's a remote meeting and there's a task. And it's kind of go off and do things, come back, we'll talk about it, what works, we'll evaluate it, that sort of idea. Okay, so all we need here is a very basic outline of what the work group is going to look like going forward as a plan. And that should be developed to a decent degree in that work group session 1. What is it we're trying to achieve? Okay. And when do we want to meet again? And have a decent time frame between the meetings so that they can go off and try things and come back. It doesn't have to be, it's going to be the 2nd of February at 3 o'clock. We don't need that, but we just need to say within February, we're going to come back again. Then we're going to come back again in April. That sort of idea. Okay. And this has got kind of advice of when we expect that to happen. Now I know it's going to be more compressed with cohort 1 because we're a bit further behind, but that's where we're at. So not a huge amount of detail in there. A huge amount of detail will go in here, and as I said, I will do another video around work group questions. Catherine.
As far as I know, my workgroup leader doesn't have access to the spreadsheet to edit it.
The work group leader.
Yeah.
Okay,
So-
Diane, can we take that as an action to make sure that any workgroup lead that gets contracted within a cluster does then have access to the spreadsheet?
And
Yeah, absolutely, that should happen. Catherine, who's your work group leader? Just
Helen
I'll get that-
Cotton.
Okay, I'll get that done now.
Thank you. And the second one, if obviously, because we've got such a compressed timeline with some of these schools, and you're not going to get 10 sessions in, are we just filling in what we can with this? You know, if it's 6 or 7, then we just do 6 or 7.
I think that's one takeaway Paulina discussed, because cohort 1 is compressed. Do we still give, do we go past the deadline or to allow that time, or do we compress?
Sorry, I think we need to take that away and look at what the impact of that would be, Paul.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll get back to you on that. Whether we, in terms of the work group bit, certainly whether we just shorten it because of the time frame, and therefore there's a less amount of hours, or whether we actually allow the work group to extend a bit further on. But we'll get back to you on that bit. Sarah?
Yeah, so that I'm just looking at the hours on here. Now, where it's a task, I'm presuming is that for the schools to do the task, and it's not necessarily work group lead time, as in the work group lead is not part of those 4 hours. And where does, where do we ensure that the time matches up? Because obviously there may be prep for the work group lead to do somewhere. And basically, what do those hours need to be on that form?
Yeah, no, I get that. So this is obviously school facing, but if you remember the work group lead training, when they're off doing the task, you're doing that nudging, checking in,
Yeah.
how you're doing, planning. So the amount of time you've set for the kind of task is the amount of time of hours you've got to be doing that bit in between. So it just
Okay,
kind of automatically matches up.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Okay. So that's the action planning element to it. I'm going to go into the progression checklist. We'll delve a little bit into the evaluation, but not massively. I'll zoom in so you can see this. So the first thing, just to, if you haven't already noticed, that the dimension option documents are there now. That just supports you and guiding you off to the CPD that would help, and the different resources that would help, and the type of coaching and bespoke interventions as examples are there. So if you haven't seen them yet, check them out. They're not the be all and end all. They are just guidance to support you as advisors on what it could look like. So the checklist is nice and easy for you, but very important for us. So this bit here, this percentage here, is the progress that this cluster is making, and that number is coming from the yeses in this box. That's as simple as that. Okay, so these are all the things, and this probably will be one of the things that is adapted going forward, because as we work through this, we identify the different things within a checklist that needs to occur that maybe I didn't think about. That's just natural. We haven't been through it before. But at the minute, I think it's a pretty good model of the things you should be doing within a cluster and the sort of timeframes we're looking at. So as something has occurred, like workgroup session 1 has been complete, you were there, or you've been told by the workgroup lead, you just simply click yes. There's 3 implementation sessions that have been added to the action plan. I've done that. It's added to the action plan. They haven't been complete yet, but at least they're there. We know what they're going to be. Okay. That's the idea. You just go down, click yes. That is calculated in here. And why it's important is one of the ways in which we're going to ensure that we keep on track with they're at where they need to be, is that percentage is pulled into a central spreadsheet so that we can see the progress of each cluster, which then therefore if there's ones that look, oh, they're massively behind, we can then come to you and try and support and think what's going, see what's going wrong and see if we can support you. So that's why it's really important you keep up to date with your action planning. Okay, so that's the checklist, a real good checklist for you to know what should be happening. Right, last one. So this here is the evaluation. We don't need to worry too much about it now, but it's something you need to start thinking about going forward. There is, again, zoom in a little bit. This data is the data pulled directly from the front sheet. So these are the bits where, where that school is at the start. All your job will be in time will be to place the score of where they're at the end. Okay, that then calculates these colorful ones, don't touch them. They calculates the progress they've made, which then calculates a score here, and your chosen dimensions you'll have to work out yourself, but it's not a big deal. Okay, so what it should do is say, because of the work we're doing with school, they started here, they finished here, which means they moved through all 7 dimensions and the score improved by X, Y, Z. And in the 2 chosen dimensions, we actually improved it dramatically more. That's the idea. Whether this qualitative information that we need changes, we don't know yet. We're going to look at a little bit more about what sort of information we want from an advisor around the cluster. But there's just a space there to type in any sort of information you want around the evaluation, any qualitative information. Okay, so that's it around the action plan. I'm going to stop sharing. And if you've got any questions on any of that linked to the action plan, and then we're going to move into discussing your successes and your challenges. So any questions first? Carmine?
On the coaching, just something that came up relevant to the cluster I lead. So basically, they have this superb computing lead who's actually been like working across schools, but he's leaving in December. He's going abroad. So in terms of coaching and restructuring and so on, so I do a little bit of the coaching and everything. Of course, got to go to teachers, but actually I feel that the one that I need to advise is their improvement partner on how they're gonna not fall again in the same trap. Do I have to do that as part of my advisory time, or if that becomes longer than he needs, can that be part of the coaching? He's employed by the school, by the way. But basically, he needs the help at this stage in terms of how he leads computing across those primary schools that he's responsible for. But I don't know.
So is it a trust one?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So and there's someone leaving and someone else is coming in.
Pardon?
Is someone else coming in, or who's the person that you're talking about doing that work with?
They've got to appoint someone. They just which I doubt they will be able to.
So who's the person you're wanting to coach?
The whole dynamic of the cluster in our case, because this guy's played a big part, but he's moving on. So
who's the person that you're talking about working with?
School improvement partner.
A school improvement partner.
Yeah, which probably, as I say, he's kind of sits slightly outside, but he's the one who's going. I don't know. I was just thinking that he would actually need help, but if we got to help the teachers, then we help the teachers. But there is no teacher at the moment. Oh, no key teacher is gone. Yeah, it's a bit tricky. Anyway,
let's pick that up separately because I think it's a more complex situation to answer now.
Yeah,
I haven't got an answer right now.
Yeah.
Diane?
Apologies everyone. This is actually a question for Paul. It just mentioned that the links for the cluster choices are in the advisor progress thing. Well, I don't think they are yet. We're going to be putting them there for cohort 2. There's a list of them. The links aren't there. It's going to take a while to do that. So just to speed it up, I can bob the whole folder of choices into each one of your school folders so you've got it.
Yeah, that's me mixed up. They are there ready for cohort 2, but your action plan's predated. So yeah, thanks, Diane. We're going to they're in a folder.
I'll just drop them in on board.
Yeah, they're in a folder for you to view. Thanks. Okay, so we're moving on to sharing successes first. Okay, we will have a chance to share your challenges, so be ready for that, and we will be listening. But are there anything that you want to share in terms of the successes, the things that are working well that others could benefit from? Okay, so open the floor. What seems to be working that others could benefit from? All time coming, or you're ready to go?
I'm always ready to go, but it's not me though. It would be for me the biggest success has been Nick Templeton as work group lead. So it's about the team you've got around. So yeah, having him, it's been a great thing. So hopefully maybe picking his brain on ways that, you know, for other people. But
Yeah, making sure you've got the right team is massively important, and not kind of trying to do it all on your own. So where you can spread the load with work group lead, different PDLs to do different parts of it, that's probably a better model if the capacity and capabilities in that region. Catherine?
So it was initially a challenge, but now a success at getting people together for the work group and getting communication, getting things organised is really, really hard, as people know, in multiple schools, particularly if you've got 6 of them. Both clusters I'm involved in are actually trusts, which helps. So we've actually got a named person in the trust, so a programme manager and a curriculum lead, I think, in the other one, who is actually coordinating that and saying, this is the date we're doing and everybody needs to attend, because otherwise that's been a massive challenge to actually get people to come to meetings. Obviously, if you've got schools that aren't in a trust, it's finding the right person to be able to do that, but having some kind of senior leadership sort of pressure from the top really works. And just saying, we're doing this, we're behind this, and it's really important that you attend that, just makes a massive difference.
Yeah, brilliant, thanks. It sounds like that is definitely a trust versus non-trust cluster issue, isn't it? Where you've got that power from above saying you are doing that and that's your time, versus no one having that autonomy to do that where they're not within a trust. I'd be interested to know if anyone has managed to do a non-trust cluster in such a way or a similar way where you've let someone lead on that organization. Dale?
Yeah, I've been quite lucky in 3, no, hang on, 1, 2, 3, 4 small primary schools that I'm advisor for, that I've got in. 2 of them share a computing lead, and so that's really useful because she oversees the whole lot. But then the other 2 schools, the head teachers are getting involved because they're such a small school that the head teachers are taking the computing lead, or certainly come to the planning meeting so far, and going forward, I think they will be taking it on so that they can then cascade it down to the rest of the school, and we can pick off the people who are having problems with delivering computing. So I'm really pleased about that.
So getting that kind of senior leadership, being a bit proactive in it to kind of, yeah,
seeing that it's important and being able to demonstrate that to other teachers where other teachers are perhaps lacking in skill and confidence. It's important enough for the senior leader in the school to get involved, so everybody will be able to. That's the plan.
Lovely, brilliant. Thanks, Dale. Anyone else want to share anything that's going well out there that others could learn from? And they're all, I bet they're all hands up when the challenges occur. Nobody else? Okay, I'm not going to labour the point, and let's move on to challenges. Hands up, and we'll go one by one. And we are listening, so please be honest. No challenges either. Brilliant. Carmine and then Catherine.
So honesty and confidentiality. The challenge is a new thing. It's really exciting. I think it's super powerful, but kind of making it just smoothly work and not overload the teachers within the schools that are doing other things has been my challenge. So I had, for instance, I thought I had, and I still think I have, a fantastic person within the school, the schools, totally on board. But obviously, new year, that first month she disappeared. And obviously by her disappearing, because we were at the start, that's why I was saying, thank God there was Nick there, because Nick obviously was working already with a couple of the other people. So things kept moving. But this person just, she had to do other things. So that was my challenge. And the second challenge has been, we're really working at it, but my action plan at the moment is not looking great, because I've not had that much of a chance to write what we've been doing there, because mostly I don't want to just be me, the person who write beautiful action plan, but I want it to be a real reflection of the computing cluster. So as I say, being totally honest here, that's where I'm at. I'm learning a lot.
Thanks, Carmine. Yes, I don't know how you mitigate against a key person within a cluster just disappearing halfway through. It's just one of those things. Hopefully on the action plan point, everyone's a bit clearer and can kind of get it into a far more advanced state, ready for next week. Catherine and Dale, before you go, Catherine, Carol, is the bespoke intervention comment a positive? I'm thinking it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
brilliant. Okay, thank you for that. Catherine?
A couple of people have mentioned it in the chat already, and I'm not stating anything that will be a massive surprise, but time. Just time getting teachers out, but also because it's been so compressed, I'm really worried we're just not going to get anything meaningful done. So I think, as Matt put in the chat about, if we can extend it, and I know you're going to have a look at this, it would be really useful just to give a bit more time for it to have some meaningful impact, because by the time we get people organised and get going with stuff, it always takes that time to sort of get into it, and then people disappear, or so nothing surprising.
No, that's fine. A lot of people have put time in the chat as well, so for different various reasons of time, but yeah, we'll note all them down. Dale?
Time's always going to be a problem. It's just, finding ways of getting around that. But for me, the major challenge has been herding them cats, getting all the number of schools into line to be able to get a date for a meeting, and for every meeting. That's been rather difficult. The other difficult thing had been that I got a cluster all set up with 3 schools, and one of them, after the summer holidays, decided to drop out. Luckily, I got another one to shoehorn in there, but by them dropping out, made it a non-viable cluster then, which would have been a real problem if I hadn't got this other one ready to fit in. That's it.
Yeah, lovely. Yeah, herding cats or juggling soup. Yeah, lovely. So just something that came to my mind there is, if we are really struggling to get them back together at the same time, quite regularly, and if it's them kind of feeding back what they've tried, then potentially would be quite flexible in the fact that we just talk to the individual and say, can you produce a 10-minute video of what you tried, what worked, what didn't work, and that could then be picked up by the rest of them, who can then watch it in their own time. Or you could do that with multiple people and they all kind of watch everyone's videos, so that if they can't be in the same time, at least they're all feeding back to each other, but in just a different sense. I wouldn't say that was what you'd want to do throughout, because you do want them to meet and do want them to collaborate and chat. But at times, if it's really difficult, that could be one way around it. Okay, that's particularly around the work group element mostly. Melanie?
Yeah, thank you. I hope the background noise is not getting too bad here. So I already said, by the way, in the chat, a blended approach for work group meetings has worked really well for us. So it's difficult to facilitate, but actually some people on the screen and some people in the room has worked. A challenge, however, do we have any idea about longevity? So we working on their I probably need to find a quieter space. I'm so sorry. It's a very small school. So longevity for our project. What I mean by that is we currently work until May. So successes, then it would be nice to know we can build on those. Is there any idea, the indication we can communicate to leadership that this is a project that we do right now. It lives until May next year, but is there any indication where we can say that this can continue? Schools often work under a 5-year plan, for example. I'm thinking of non-CSE schools, etc. If they want to build that up by May, we can't really achieve that.
Yeah, I think there's two elements to your question. Firstly, May is tight because of the kind of reality of cohort 1, and therefore when we're already taking that away to think about can we extend certain elements of it. The second one is what can they do after the cluster. I wouldn't suggest that they would be part of an ongoing cluster, i.e. we couldn't use them again as in the cluster model. We have to kind of get out of their clusters, but it's about. And it's almost like the SME work a little bit. Is there a point of handing over to the computing hubs and saying, you've done our work with us, this is the output, but the action plan, the certificates we've asked you to do, can the computing hubs kind of take over that support at that point? And we did that a little bit with the SME model, didn't we? If you remember, for those who were involved, where once we had done our work as a non-GCSE school or as a priority school, we kind of then did that little handover at the computing hubs, who should have then taken on that relationship and moving through that.
Yes, also then I guess it makes the other thing that I put in the chat as a success, seeing people from the cluster through the PDL training seems to be really crucial then. And can I also then confirm that are we still able, so would I, for example, be able to hand over what I'm doing at the moment as a work group lead? Is it feasible to hand that over to one of the cluster teachers?
So for them to kind of work through a cluster model on their own. Yes, so I think you're right. If we can upskill individuals through the PDL program, that's always a benefit to the schools that are involved in that. And then almost saying, yes, we're stepping away as the NCCE, but you've got a model, you've got a direction, a goal that you're trying to achieve. Then it's up to them, isn't it? And I think that's just something that the cluster, a group of schools, would continue themselves because they've thought it was useful and they want to continue that collaboration. It doesn't necessarily have to be with our involvement, although it would be really good to have how it's going and kind of that information back to us, because that would be good to report back on
Yes.
to people.
But just to clarify, is it feasible for work group lead role to change maybe in January, because maybe that PDL is then ready, this newly qualified PDL might be able to to take on the role, so they're taking over in January. Is that something that can be, because it could be quite nice?
So if that individual is a lead PDL, they've gone through the associate and the lead, and they've completed the work group lead training, then they can be contracted as a work group lead. The difficulty is, and I'm looking at Diana and Pauline now, is because you've already been contracted as that work group lead, what's the complexity in then recontracting another individual to take over halfway through or work alongside you? That's, I'll leave that in Diane.
It's not a barrier we couldn't overcome, Melanie. It's more contracting, and they could only have the time that you haven't used.
Sorry, could you say that again?
We could only contract them the time that you haven't used.
Yeah. Actually, I'll just follow on from that. What isn't quite a nice model, though, if they were trained up to PDL2 lead and had done the work group training, we have another cohort that will start in, I can't remember, January 25. The final of the 3 cohorts, and it would be marvellous if they could go on to be a work group leader for that. It's income back into the schools as well, which is a model that works really well on enthused partnerships. We take the lead school, they train up to be an advisor, and a PDL that can deliver CPD for the hubs then.
It's 2 hands. Neil first, and then Comina.
Hi, Paul. This is kind of a good and a challenge. It's managing expectations. I've got one cluster that's 2/3 of it are uber keen and really up for it and really want to get on and get things done, and then the other third are somewhat dragging their heels. So it's managing the expectations of the group. So in one way it's really good because they're really up for it and want, but then we've got to try and pull the other third of the work group along as well. So it's using the enthusiasm of the schools that are there to motivate that other third of the cohort to really get involved. So that's sort of a bit of a bonus, but also a bit of a challenge.
And is it, and this is just maybe nosy, I suppose, but is it the schools that are, really wanting to do it, versus the schools that are a bit lethargic about it? Is it because they volunteered to do it, whereas the other schools perhaps have been nudged to do it? Like the individuals have been kind of pushed that way. You should do this.
The heads have said we want to be involved with this and go and do it, and they're a little reticent because of that. But
Right.
then I can also apply SLT pressure to get it moving if we need to. But it's better if they all just buy in.
Yeah. Yeah. Brilliant. Thanks, Neil.
Thanks.
Carmine, was it you? I think your hand was up,
Yeah.
wasn't it? Yeah.
It was, yeah, but it was just to reinforce what Diane was saying. To get to the computing quality framework level 5, I think the staff development one, and several of the others, you need to basically have contributed beyond your school. So, and you need to have contributed in a meaningful way. So, I can say that the PDL training and so on, and then obviously being involved, it's super proof of that. I think. Yeah.
Yeah. It's good evidence to mark it off for 5, isn't it? Yeah. Lovely. Okay, we've got 13 minutes left, and the last agenda point is just questions. So I will open the floor again for any sort of questions that either we can answer now or as ever take away and get back to you on. Melanie.
Yeah, sorry. If at this stage or anytime soon we recognize that some of our clusters may actually make a pair of clusters, they're so similar and they would benefit from actually joining one cluster, because it seems, is that ever a possibility? I imagine, Diane, because of the logistics around contracts, etc., that would be difficult, but I'm just throwing it out there as an option. Is that something that is within the realms of even consideration on the horizon?
Melanie, I do apologise. I didn't catch the beginning bit. So a school wanting to...
So no, if I identify that 2 clusters would actually quite work well as one cluster, is there ever a chance ever of clusters merging? I imagine that is not possible because of the logistics of the contracts, but I just thought I'd throw it out there.
Well, certainly for clusters that don't exist yet, yes, we can merge them. For clusters that already exist, that's more difficult because of we've got the number of clusters that we've reported to the DFE, but that doesn't mean that you couldn't work with them collectively. So you could arrange sessions that are shared, and the time can be allocated to both of them. You could have, if it was the same work group leader for both of them, they're basically getting paid for doing the same thing twice, but that's fine. If the value is delivered, that would be fine. It's about what's being delivered to the schools less than what the work group leader is actually doing. So yeah, we'd be happy with that.
Exactly. Maybe there are only some subsets, maybe some work group sessions could be joined between 2 clusters and not all of them. That's brilliant. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Any efficiencies that you can make,
yeah.
If the collateral benefit is there are cost efficiencies to you or the others, that's great. But if there are efficiencies in the teacher's time as well, that's really good. So we'd be very happy with that.
Brilliant. Carol?
really just putting the practicality on that, Diane. That's exactly what we're doing in the Northwest. I work closely with another advisor, and when we do get together and decide what our work groups are going to be, and we just invite the schools from the other cluster into it. So instead of there being actually whatever, there's 3 work groups, they actually could potentially be into 6 work group meetings. Same with the bespoke intervention as well. So that's working very well when we're working closely together as advisors.
That is really great that you're doing that. And I'm going to make a big note of that. It'll be after I've gone, I'm sure. But I think that's something that might also be interesting for us to report back to the DFE. So that sort of multiplier effect. So we're working as a cluster, but then we're joining with other clusters. And what's the impact of that? I think that'd be really interesting.
Carol, can I just ask a follow-up question on that? Is that alleviating some of the challenges around time for the teachers to be available to attend things like the work group? If there's more sessions that in theory they can attend, is that addressing some of that issue?
You know what, I'd really like to say yes.
Yes,
Okay.
definitely.
Well, it's not making it worse, is it?
It's not making it worse.
Okay.
It does mean that, you know, they may not be able to have attended this one session, but they'll know there'll be another session somewhere else, but it may be on something different. It just depends. I think it's always about having options available, isn't it? You know, so that they have got that opportunity. But yeah, it's unfortunately it's still not managing time. You know, the amount of time that's in a day, I suppose.
But Pauline, also, I want to say it frees me up as work group lead, you know, so my dates become available for both of those clusters. So it doubles the capacity that we can make. It's really, really good. And so even if the foci, they overlap certainly. And so getting input from different teachers, it's great. It's really working.
Okay, well, I'm sure there was a hand up a second ago. It's disappeared. Nope. Okay, any more questions?
A couple in the chat, Paul, might want to go to.
Is that right? Let's have a look. Diane, there's one in there from Dave. I'll leave with you. Coming, I'm not quite sure what you mean about that one, so you might need to elaborate. I'll come back to you in a second.
Can I just really quickly share my screen, Paul,
Yeah,
and then I can
yeah.
show everyone where these are. So let me just show you this. You might not see this view, depending on your access, but this is the computing cluster for school site. And you should have access to a folder called School Clusters. And as you'll see, these are all of your folders that you access. But there is also within the folder May 23 initial cohort, and you should have all had access to that. So if you haven't, do please let me know. This is where we have the list of all of the schools. You can see your computer cluster reference at the side, and then the date that the letter of intent was returned. So I'm going to bob that link in the chat, and if you haven't got access, if you can just let me know or let us know via computing clusters at stem.org.uk, and I sound like I'm one of those online dial-in things, don't I? Then we can get you added.
Diane, can I just say that there are no dates in that spreadsheet. I can't see any dates for any of my schools, which I know have given their letters of intent back. Can you actually go back to that sheet and actually identify the dates when those letters have been sent?
Let me just have a look. You're not wrong, Dale. I can't see any dates at all.
But there are
I can see one date.
There aren't many, yeah.
There are a couple, but definitely none of the ones that I know of, and certainly not the vast majority.
No, there's something that happened there. So hold that.
action.
There
Please
is
don't
a
go and
sorry. There is a filter applied. If you take the filter off on column
yeah.
G, it then populates a load of dates.
It does.
Column
Sorry.
G, contact.
Yes, yeah. I don't know why it was there. However,
No,
I've
sorry.
taken the filter off and it's now got a number of dates returned.
Ah, thank you.
There you go.
You're a
Sorry, I must
star.
learn how to drive a spreadsheet.
It's picnic, problem in chair, not in computer.
Okay, Paul, I've screenshotted your question and I've put it into the hands of the people who could give you the right answer. I will get back to you. Okay, doesn't sound right to me, but I'll get back to you. In terms of chasing for things as an advisor, that would normally, making sure the people within the cluster are doing the right things is part of your time. What would be interesting feedback is, and when I kind of looked at this the first time, 3 days did seem tight for an advisor. So that would be good feedback if you thinking, I'm only halfway through this and I'm nearly at me 3 days. That's the sort of feedback that would help us mold going forward the right model for this.
There's a question there from Sarah. Is cohort 2 going to be before half term for ones with 6 schools and good to go? Goodness, I hope so, Sarah. Yeah, we before we go ahead and contract this new cohort, we just wanted to make sure we'd ironed out any of the difficulties you might have had in the first cohort. I think we can see that there's lots of things we need to look at, but nothing necessarily that's going to hold up cohort 2. So with a good win behind me, yes. As long as your half term isn't next week, I'm basing half term on being at the beginning of November.
I was going to say our half term's next week, but I'll give you another week.
Okay, thank you.
And I think Carol's reply there, indicates that 3 days for advisors is something we need to look at, Pauline. When you compare that with 9 days for bespoke intervention, it doesn't quite feel right. Okay, so unless there's any other last minute questions, we are 3 minutes before 3:30, which is a good amount of time. God, there's always one coming in here. Go on.
You said that someone mentioned expenses. I haven't read this properly. Okay, maybe, but so I know that my work group lead, wants to travel to meet the schools and so on and so forth. Obviously, no expenses means that the only way that they will do that is remotely, because otherwise they'll lose money. It's a fact. Or they might say, you know what, it's too much hassle because I want to go and meet them. I want to work with people. I don't want to work another time in front of a screen. So that's not necessarily from me as an advisor. I know that, and I hadn't worked that one out. So yeah, genuinely there is no expenses. It's yes, no. What's the answer?
Okay, so no, there aren't travel expenses, just as there aren't for Enthuse Partnership advisors. The work group leader, the cluster advisor, but everything apart from the bespoke CPD, sorry, the bespoke interventions role, they're all on the enhanced day rates. So that isn't actually supposed to cover travel. But if you were getting a day rate to deliver face-to-face CPD, you would expect to travel to where that was delivered. Expenses aren't necessarily offered. So we would hope that at least the first, well, actually for the work group, do they need to be in person at all? We did say that we thought the advisors should, but I don't know, Paul, is it necessary for work groups?
I think what we said, which was the advice of people who've done work groups before, was that in the maths model was that the first and last sessions are always more impactful if they're face to face. So it's not like they must, but it will be more impactful if those first and last ones are face to face.
Julia, sorry, Julia, I noticed you've said that some expenses have been incurred already. I think you have been in touch with Helen. If you can just let us know what expenses and to what level, but that was not in the contract. I don't want to quote, that sounds really brutal, doesn't it? But I'm not quite sure why we thought that my expenses would be funded.
Okay, Diane, do you want to stop the recording there? And yeah, thank you everyone for attending this. Any questions, please ask. And finally, just to say, yeah, next Friday